Walk us through how you see this minuscule drop in the ocean that the OPEC Plus group was keen to put on the table. I have to tell you, I got so many press clippings from various OPEC ministers about this. They were terribly proud that they'd done something, if not much at all.
Yeah, I mean, the mood was very good. I do think they think, again, they've done something. They are straddling a line between, look, they're very, very concerned about recessionary fears, the macro sentiment, and I understand that was a big talking point inside the meeting, particularly His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz and Novak. So they can't be adding that much more. They've also highlighted that it's refining that's the crunch rather than crude oil. But at the same time, oil prices are still close to $100. There's been calls from the United States constantly to add more. So it was a very tricky line to thread. And I do think they've done it very successfully, other than the fact that, look, ultimately 100,000 barrels per day, it's a symbolic gesture. You and I both know it's not going to make any difference to the market, any difference to balances, especially because most of the countries don't even have the spare capacity to give production. To be fair, they do mention that as well. At least they're being honest about the fact that, look, we actually don't have spare capacity. So what's the point of coming up with a big number, which we're not adding anyway? So yeah, I mean, it's a symbolic gesture. It's going to make no difference to markets. We haven't changed our balances because it actually doesn't move the needle.
So, Amrita, this doesn't move the needle, as you say, a symbolic gesture, but also you can't say OPEC hasn't done anything. And as Hadley and I were discussing before, we've seen Western leaders like Emmanuel Macron and President Joe Biden expending a lot of political capital to reset the relationship with Saudi Arabia. Is this going to ease some of the calls that we've heard towards the group from those leaders to pump more oil, or will the narrative stay the same at this point? They know the issues around spare production capacity, but they don't seem to be listening.
Well, I don't think the issues are going to go away, right? At least not until the midterms. And I think you're going to continue to see calls on OPEC from Western leaders to increase production, not for a single second acknowledging the fact that the reason we are here today, high oil prices, first and foremost, it's not Russia, it's not OPEC, it's basically years of underinvestment. And, Western governments do have to take responsibility for the fact that they have been actively discouraging investment in oil and gas. And it's been all about let's focus on renewables. And yet demand hasn't come down because at the same time, governments are actively subsidizing oil demand, right? So that's the mismatch that we are dealing with. And OPEC are, for the first time on record, coming out and saying there isn't any spare capacity, or there's not much spare capacity. We really need to hold on to this for a time when there's a real supply outage. I think we tend to forget the SPR is coming to an end in October, at the end of October. The embargo on Russia is going to kick in either first in December for crude and then for products in February. So I don't think the calls are going to go away, but equally, this is going to be the same situation. Either OPEC will end up holding flat in October or again, doing the symbolic 100,000 barrels per day gesture, which just really won't mean anything for real markets.
So, Amrita, walk us through what you expect OPEC producers to do next year, particularly as we look towards the expiry of this current agreement.
I think that's the interesting one, and I am really looking forward to being in Vienna after so long in December. It's supposed to be a face-to-face meeting, but I think that's where the Russia angle comes in as well. Following the embargo, does Russia actually find it challenging to place its oil? So far, more or less all the oil is flowing east. There's been a little bit of a cutback, but not a huge amount. If there is challenges for Russia, then I don't see how Russia is going to agree to OPEC Plus actually coming up with big increases in production. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, to be fair, is really outside of the GCC. Nobody else has spare capacity. So the group as a whole will always struggle to come up with anything that tells, by country at least, that tells the whole group can increase production, but the rest of them really can't. So this is going to be an interesting meeting because, and again, also for Saudi Arabia and UAE and even Kuwait and even Iraq, let's assume they have a little bit more left, they don't necessarily want to bring everything on at once because given how low inventories are, given how low spare capacity is, the embargo is just one thing. What if Libya goes offline again? What if Nigeria goes offline? They will need to hold on to some spare capacity. So I think that's what really makes it challenging to come up with a new deal, which is what they need to. But what would that deal look like if it doesn't have Russia's backing and if the countries don't have the spare capacity?